One of the most important things that Valve did when they made the Steam Deck was making the deck verified system. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's basically 4 qualifications that can be given to any particular game on Steam, and it's an indicator of how well it will run on SteamOS. The categories of the verified system are, of course, verified, meaning it should run really well on SteamOS, playable, meaning that you probably have a few things that you might have to do in order to get it working, but it's not too hard to do that stuff. Unsupported, which means it should not run on the Steam Deck at all. And then finally, untested, which most of the games on Steam are untested at this point because there's so many games on Steam and Valve hasn't had a chance to go through and get them all tested yet. Now, one of the metrics that Valve often discusses is the number of verified or playable titles that are on Steam. When the deck first launched, they were sitting somewhere around 1,000. And as of recording this, which is about a year later, we're sitting around 8,000 or 9,000. That number goes up really, really quickly as Valve goes through and tests a whole bunch of games. But I think that the system is flawed because there's been plenty of games that I've played that have been verified that I feel like maybe they shouldn't be verified. Maybe they should be playable instead. And there's been plenty of games that have been unsupported that have worked just fine with some tweaking, or sometimes even without some tweaking. So there's definitely room for subjectivity when it comes to whether or not a game is marked as verified or playable on the Steam Deck. It's kind of hard to actually lay blame at the feet of Valve when a game is marked as verified and maybe it's not a perfectly smooth experience because they obviously, like, they're not playing the whole game. They can't test every single use case. That's something that really should be on the devs. But it's also not the fault of the devs because the devs made many of these games before the Steam Deck even came out, and they made them for Windows. They didn't make them with Linux in mind. So, the issues that happen with Proton compatibility layers, whose fault is that? I don't know that it's anybody's fault, but Valve often steps in and finds solutions for games that run into these kinds of issues. We've seen in the past where Square Enix had a launcher, and that launcher was it Square Enix? It was EA, I think. Or maybe it was both. It's been quite a few times that this has happened. As one of the big publishers, they updated their launchers and suddenly a bunch of their games stopped working on the Steam Deck. So Valve had to come in to the rescue and say, hey, let's update to this version of Proton for all of these games, and everything was just fine. Well, it seems like they may have to do that again with Dead Cells Return to Castlevania, because as much as I'm enjoying this game, I really don't think that it should be marked as verified. If you've never played Dead Cells before, it's a mixture of a Metroidvania and a roguelike. And if we take those two genres and just kind of push them off to the sides, I would say that Dead Cells sits in the middle as a really great example of both genres separately and a wonderful way to mix those two genres together. So if you don't know what a roguelike is, essentially, each time you play the game, you are going through until you die, you go right back to the beginning, you lose all of the stuff that you got, but you also found ways to upgrade your character throughout that run. A Metroidvania, the way those games work is generally you go to locations, you'll see a location that you can't get to because you don't have a certain ability yet, and you'll be able to take advantage of that later on in the game once you've unlocked more abilities. Dead Cells somehow threads the needle and stitches these two genres together just absolutely masterfully. I'm a huge fan of the game, and I played it a whole bunch back on my PS4, and I've been really enjoying the Castlevania DLC. So let's talk about the Castlevania DLC. It has 3 new biomes, 3 new boss fights, a whole bunch of outfits for you to unlock, and a whole bunch of new monsters. Let's first take a look at the graphics. Castlevania has always had its own style, and Dead Cells absolutely has its own style. And somehow Motion Twin has found a way to bring the art style of Castlevania into the art style of Dead Cells, and it still feels like Castlevania and it feels like Dead Cells at the same time. We shouldn't be totally surprised by this because I've seen a lot of collaborations that Motion Twin has done with other indie studios by bringing like Shovel Knight into the game or Hollow Knight into the game in like those ways through costumes and stuff like that. And every time they make it feel like it's always been a part of this world. Moving on to the monsters from Castlevania, they look absolutely fantastic in the Dead Cells style. The skeletons that throw the bones in an arc or the fishman that jump up from below. I've always adored the monsters of Castlevania, and playing against them in Dead Cells is awesome. Although I will say this, I'm dreading running into the Medusa heads from Castlevania in this game. I know that they were the bane of my existence in Castlevania 1 because of the knockback. We'll see how it ends up happening here in Dead Cells. They've also brought across a whole bunch of Castlevania music. I think it was 51 tracks are coming into it from Castlevania. They sound fantastic, and they also have, I think, 12 Castlevania tracks that have been completely remastered in the Dead Cells theme. And everything just gels really, really well. Nothing seems out of place. But even though Motion Twin did a great job bringing the visuals and the audio experience of Castlevania into Dead Cells, they missed the boat on something very, very important. Torches. That's one of the first things that you did back in Castlevania 1. As you're walking along on your way to the castle, you pull out your whip, you hit a torch, and a new piece of the whip comes out, upgrading your whip. Now, I understand that maybe they don't want to do that in this game because that might upset like game balance issues, but the very first thing that I did once I went to the castle outskirts is I tried to attack the torches and nothing came out. No hearts, you couldn't even break them. So it just like that right there makes it feel like not Castlevania. It's definitely a small thing, but it's something that I could not stop focusing on every time that I played the game. So obviously, I'm a huge fan of Dead Cells Return to Castlevania, so why wouldn't it be verified? Well, there's a couple of things that boxes you have to tick in order to be considered a verified game. One of those is font size. You have to have fonts that are readable on a 7-inch screen. I will say that when I play on the Steam Deck instead of on my big screen TV or on these Nreal Air glasses, video coming soon about those, on the 7-inch screen, some of the fonts are a little bit hard to read, but I'm also old and maybe my eyesight's not the best, so I can't be the best judge of that. That's not my big gripe here. My big gripe is whenever you dock the game. So if I'm playing Dead Cells and I hook it up to my official Steam Deck dock, sometimes the audio stays on the Steam Deck. The video goes to my TV or the video goes to these glasses, but the audio continually comes out of the Steam Deck instead of either the speakers on the glasses or my TV. Very, very frustrating. At first I thought it was a problem with the glasses, but it's not. It's a problem with the game. Then sometimes when you put the deck to sleep, and then you come back later and power it back up, you run into this issue where the audio is completely out of sync. So you'll do an attack and like 2 or 3 seconds later, you'll hear the audio of that attack. It's way out of sync, and the only way to fix it is to completely shut down the game and reboot. And if you're in the middle of a run, that means that run is essentially over, and that's not the way that you want to play a game like this. So it shouldn't be verified because of that. Now, nowhere in Valve's documentation about what qualifies as verified do they mention the docked experience at all. So maybe that's something that they just don't bother to test. Well, whenever you dock this game, you run into these issues. So if you're planning on picking up Dead Cells, that's something you want to know about ahead of time. Now, I asked our community Discord if there was anybody else who was running into this issue. By the way, if you haven't joined our community Discord, there is a link in the description down below. And in the description down below, there's also a link to this shirt. But I asked and they said, yes, everybody else was running into the exact same issue. And I believe it was if my memory serves correctly, it was our community member Odo had given us a little link to an article about Proton GE. And yes, I'm totally aware that there's a native Linux version of this game. I simply was trying Proton in order to solve the audio issues. If you're unfamiliar with Proton GE, it's basically a different version of Proton. Valve has their own version of Proton, and then this other developer, Glorious Egg Roll, has Proton GE, which is often a little bit faster on getting stuff fixed. Well, if you run Proton GE, I can't remember which one, I'm gonna put it on the screen right here. If you run that version of Proton, all of these issues go away. So I was in the middle of editing this video and they patched the game. Now I figured, oh, okay, that's awesome. If they patched the game, then maybe all of the issues that I was talking about are non-existent. And that, unfortunately, is not the case, because I loaded up the game just a few minutes ago in order to record some footage for this video. And I ran into audio crackling, and that's even on Proton GE 7-29. So I don't think that I can recommend that you pick up this game if you're going to play it on the Steam Deck docked in any way, because there's just too many audio issues that I've been running into, and it's really, really frustrating. Okay, back to younger Bill. Back to younger Bill. I was about to shut this off, and my wife said, "No, he's old still." And now she's smirking. I'm sure what will happen in the near future is that Valve will add that stuff to their own version of Proton, and they'll automatically select it when you're running Dead Cells. But until they do, I don't think that the game should be verified because of the audio sync issues whenever you put the game in sleep, or because of the docking issues whenever you hook it up to either a big screen TV or Nreal Air glasses. It's not a good experience. And for something to be verified and not a good experience, that's bad. That's a bad look for Valve. So what do you guys think? Should Valve update their verification system, or should they give it more levels or something? I think you do have to find a sweet spot between complexity and accuracy. And that's definitely a tightrope that Valve is trying to walk right now. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think about the verification system, and let me know what you think of Dead Cells Return to Castlevania. I absolutely love this game, and I'm going to be playing a whole bunch more of it now that I've got the fix. Anyway, from the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.